Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, January 20th, 2025. All right, so we have some good news today. The ceasefire in Gaza has taken effect. There were some delays. Palestinians were killed, but since it went into effect, there has been calm. And in the last episode of this show, the Israeli media was saying that the ceasefire wouldn't start until Monday, but then the next day, the Israeli government and the cabinet approved it, and the ceasefire went into effect on Sunday. Hamas released some hostages, and Israel released 90 Palestinians from jail. So that's what this first story is about. And I mean, as we're going to get into, there's reasons to be skeptical that this ceasefire might last. But overall, I think this is very positive. I mean, just a few weeks ago, I couldn't have even imagined that a ceasefire deal was possible. And now here we are, and the bombing has stopped in Gaza. So the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Hamas frees first hostages as ceasefire begins. The Gaza ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas took effect Sunday morning, leading to Hamas releasing the first 3 hostages out of the 33 they're expected to free in the first phase of the deal, which involves a 42-day truce. The 3 female hostages were handed over to the Red Cross, which said they were in good health, and transferred them to the Israeli military. The hostages made it back to Israel, and early Monday morning, Israel released 90 Palestinian women and children from the Ofer prison in the Israeli-occupied West Bank in exchange. You see this picture here. You see Hamas militants handing over the women to the Red Cross. All day on Israeli TV, they were playing videos of Hamas militants kind of parading in the streets, in their uniforms with their rifles. Very humiliating for Bibi Netanyahu. Despite the mass destruction in Gaza, you see these Hamas guys popping up, and they're saying their police force is ready to be active again. They're governing Gaza again, just like that. And I mean, it goes to show this mass destruction, this daily slaughter, did not even come close to achieving Netanyahu's stated goal of eradicating Hamas. And this is something Antony Blinken recently said, based on U.S. intelligence, Hamas has probably replaced as many fighters as it lost. And that's what happens when you kill people's women, kill people's children, and kill all these women and civilian men. And, you recruit more people for a group like Hamas. So out of the 90 Palestinians who were freed, 78 of them are West Bank residents, while 12 will be transferred to Israeli-occupied East Jerusalem. In the occupied territories, Palestinians can be imprisoned without charges, which Israel calls administrative detention. Under the first phase of the ceasefire deal, Israel will release 30 Palestinians per civilian hostage and 50 Palestinians in exchange for female IDF soldiers. The Israeli military has imposed strict measures in areas around the Ofer prison to prevent major celebrations from taking place during the prisoner release. They didn't want to see that happen again. Back in November 2023, when they had the first hostage deal, there was big celebrations when the Palestinians were released. They tried to avoid that, but still it looks like in the West Bank, there are a lot of celebrations going on. According to Middle East Eye, the Israeli military ordered shops near the prison to be closed, and police warned families not to celebrate, not to raise Palestinian flags. And Al Jazeera reported that at least 7 Palestinians had been wounded by Israeli forces outside of the prison. So the ceasefire in Gaza was supposed to go into effect at 8:30 a.m. Gaza time Sunday morning. It was 1:30 a.m. here on the East Coast of the United States when it was supposed to go into effect. But it was delayed by 3 hours. And during that time, Israel bombed the Gaza Strip, and killed at least 19 Palestinians. And among the dead were children preparing to return home because their family, their parents, thought the ceasefire was in effect, thought that they could travel safely. We'll get more into that into the next story. So Gaza's health ministry put out their update on Sunday based on the recent killing and said that their death toll since October 2023 had reached 46,913, and the number of wounded climbed to 110,750. So as we've been talking about, these numbers are considered an undercount. They don't account for the thousands, over 10,000 missing and presumed dead under the rubble. There's that report from The Lancet that found it's likely an undercount by 41%. That said the current death toll just by violence alone is likely over 70,000. Then you factor in all the indirect deaths caused by the Israeli siege, and those are still going to happen as Gaza's health infrastructure has been completely shattered. So if this ceasefire sticks, I think we're going to get a clearer picture of the dead. I think it'll take, a long time before we get the full picture when it comes to, killed directly by the war and killed by indirect causes. But I think we will know. Some conflicts like Yemen, for instance, the U.S.-backed Saudi war in Yemen, there hasn't been a comprehensive study of the casualties. The estimate from the UN is 377,000 as of 2021, but I think it's probably much higher than that. But with Gaza, I think because there's been so much attention on it, I think we eventually will get a real, about a much clearer picture than we have now of the number of dead, of the breakdown, women, children, and everything like that. All right, so the next one here, Gaza children return home only to be killed by Israel. So this is about those children that were killed on Sunday morning. This is from Middle East Eye. So Hanan al-Gidra knew her home in the southern Gaza town of Khan Yunis was partially destroyed, but decided to return anyway when she thought the ceasefire had begun. The 15-month Israeli war on Gaza had been shattering. So when her family heard there was a ceasefire being enforced at 8:30 a.m. on Sunday, they decided to go home. She said, quote, "We put all our belongings in the donkey carts and my children left before me with my husband. I stepped away to go grab some of our needs, and then I heard that there was a strike, and I knew it was them. When I got there, I found that my eldest son and my youngest daughter were killed. May God accept them. All praises due to God," end quote. Gidra said that they were killed an hour after the ceasefire was supposed to be enforced. She said, quote, "They were excited, playing and getting ready to go home. They were getting ready to meet their fate. At least they died as martyrs," end quote. Minutes before the ceasefire was set to begin, Israel declared it would continue attacking Gaza because it had not received a list of captives due to be released by Hamas. Hamas said technical field issues were behind its delay in providing the list, later adding there were errors in the names. A Palestinian official told Reuters that Israel's continuous bombardment of Gaza since the ceasefire was announced on Wednesday had hindered contact. Immediately after the 8:30 deadline, Israel began striking Gaza with warplanes, drone fire, and artillery. Attacks were reported in Gaza City, Beit Hanun in the north, and Khan Yunis and Rafah in the south. Fighter jets were also spotted flying at low altitude. Emergency responders said 19 Palestinians were killed and 36 were wounded between 8:30 a.m. and the ceasefire coming into force at 11:15 a.m. Again, imagine just being one of this woman who made it through these 15 months with her kids, and then they get killed just right before the ceasefire, when the ceasefire is supposed to take effect. So another thing that we're seeing on the ground, Palestinians are going back to where, I was going to say they're going back to their homes, but for the most part, their homes are destroyed. They're going back to where they're from. And I saw one Palestinian journalist was back in Beit Hanun, sitting in a chair just surrounded by rubble. And these cities in the north, Jabalia, the pictures, they're just completely destroyed. But people are going back because they just want to be there. I think that's a good sign that they're letting them. I know that there's nothing for them to really return to. And how realistic is it for people to really live there? But I think it's a sign that this thing might hold, that they are letting the Palestinians move freely in Gaza. I think that's a good sign. All right, so the next one here, Trump envoy Witkoff may visit Gaza. So NBC News reported on Saturday that President-elect Donald Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is considering visiting the Gaza Strip to ensure the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas stays on track. According to media reports, Witkoff's pressure on Netanyahu is what led to this deal. A White House official acknowledged on Sunday that the Trump team provided significant support to clinch the agreement. Netanyahu has said that he received assurances from Trump that he could restart military operations in Gaza after the first phase of the deal if he chooses to do so. So we'll get more into that in the next story. But this NBC report suggests, at least, that Witkoff is determined to see that the deal leads to the end of the conflict and the reconstruction of Gaza. The report said that Witkoff plans to have a near constant presence in the region to deal with potential issues that may threaten the deal. The transition official said, quote, "You have to be right on top of it, ready to snuff out a problem if it happens," end quote. The official said the incoming administration was worried about elements on both sides that might seek to sabotage the deal. The official said, quote, "Remember, there's a lot of people, radicals, fanatics, not just from the Hamas side, from the right wing of the Israeli side, who are absolutely incentivized to blow this whole deal up," end quote. The incoming administration is also considering relocating Palestinians who live in Gaza during the reconstruction, and the official said that Indonesia is a potential option. However, Palestinians may not be willing to leave. I mean, considering the history and what's gone down in Gaza and what a lot of members of the government are saying about wanting to take over Gaza and cleanse all the Palestinians, even though the place is destroyed, I'm sure some would leave, but I'm sure some would, a lot would not trust Israel that they would be able to go back. So the transition official speaking to NBC stressed the importance of good conditions for the Palestinians to ensure that the ceasefire holds. The official said, quote, "If we don't help the Gazans, if we don't make their life better, if we don't give them a sense of hope, there's going to be a rebellion," end quote. So this is a Trump transition official speaking to NBC. It's interesting. It's just not what I expected from this incoming Trump administration to see things like this. But now this next story, to get into some of the bad stuff here. But I just think there's reason, I don't want to be naive or anything. I think one thing I'm worried about is that they gave Netanyahu some kind of assurances on the West Bank and possibly Iran and, new military aid to get him to sign this deal and to agree to this stuff so things could escalate in those areas. But again, based on these reports, it seems like it might be hard for Netanyahu to restart things. But in this next story here, Netanyahu says that the U.S. guaranteed he could restart operations in Gaza. So on Saturday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he was given assurances by both President Biden and President-elect Donald Trump that he could resume military operations in Gaza after the first phase of the ceasefire deal if he chooses to do so. Under the deal, Israel and Hamas will negotiate the second phase during the first phase, which began on Sunday and involves a 42-day ceasefire. So Netanyahu said, quote, "Both President Trump and President Biden have given full backing to Israel's right to return to the fighting if Israel reaches the conclusion that the second stage negotiations are ineffectual. I greatly appreciate this," end quote. The Israeli Prime Minister said that Trump had described the ceasefire as a temporary one. He said, quote, "Trump welcomed the agreement and rightly emphasized that the first stage of the agreement is a temporary ceasefire. That is what he said, a temporary ceasefire," end quote. Netanyahu said that Trump also agreed to quote, "lift the remaining restrictions on providing vital weapons and munitions to the state of Israel. If we need to go back to the fighting, we will do so in new ways and with great force," end quote. Netanyahu has been under pressure from some members of his coalition government not to sign the ceasefire deal, including National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, and he actually quit the government on Sunday. So Ben-Gvir is out of the coalition. His Jewish Power Party has quit. They had 6 seats. They have 6 seats in the Knesset. The Netanyahu government had 68 seats out of 120. So Ben-Gvir quitting leaves them with 62, which is still a majority. But Smotrich, the finance minister, leader of the religious Zionism party, he is threatening to quit if Israel does not resume its genocidal war in Gaza after the first phase. And Smotrich says that he was given assurances from Netanyahu that Israel would restart military operations to launch a gradual takeover of the entire Gaza Strip. So Smotrich is saying that Netanyahu guaranteed him that they will completely take over and occupy Gaza and ramp up the military operations and cut off all aid. That's what Smotrich is saying. Netanyahu guaranteed him. So, I think a lot of this is Netanyahu trying to save face. And let's hope that that's what this is, and that it's not the plan to restart and ramp things up after 42 days, and that Trump's not going to back that. So Smotrich said, quote, this is one, it's just crazy. He's just totally out. This is somebody with such power in this Israeli government. He said, quote, "Don't be impressed by the forced joy of our enemy. This is an animalistic society that sanctifies death. Very soon we will erase their smile again and replace it with cries of grief and the wails of those who were left with nothing," end quote. So we'll see what happens. All right, the next one here. Massive Israeli destruction continues in Lebanon. This article is from Jason Ditz. It is now just 1 week from the end of the 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Under the terms of that deal, Israel must fully withdraw its troops from southern Lebanon by January 26. So that's very soon. Israel has completely withdrawn from just 2 towns in the first 53 days of the ceasefire, with at least 60 towns and villages still to go. It is unlikely that Tel Aviv will meet the deadline, despite U.S. assurances that it guarantees Israel will do so. Maybe agreeing to the Gaza ceasefire was a strategy about this too. Like maybe they think they can get away with staying in Lebanon longer or something. Most Lebanese seem resigned to this, but none are too optimistic. The current focus is on the few areas Israel has already left, which are filled with hundreds of damaged or entirely destroyed buildings. So throughout this so-called ceasefire, which has just been a ceasefire for Hezbollah, basically, throughout it, hundreds of Israeli violations and active demolitions have been reported in southern Lebanon, and they've almost increased the demolitions. They've really destroyed a lot of buildings. All right, so the next one here, Turkish airstrike kills Syrian Kurdish leader as offensive continues. So this is another one from Jason Ditz. Fighting between Turkish-backed SNA fighters and Kurdish SDF forces continue apace in northern Syria this weekend, supported by Turkish warplanes. The SNA fighters have attacked multiple areas between Manbij and the Tishreen Dam. Kurdish officials said they believe Turkey is trying to change the situation on the ground before President Trump takes over this week. The SNA has taken much of Manbij and has pushed heavily toward the Tishreen Dam. So far, the SDF defenses have held and the dam remains in Kurdish hands. In addition to air support for the SNA, Turkey has been conducting airstrikes on Kurdish targets across northern Syria. A Turkish airstrike on Sunday has reportedly killed Minaj Hado, the co-chairperson of the Kurdish PYD, the leading political party among the Syrian Kurds. She was among 6 civilians killed and over 20 wounded in the attack near the Tishreen Dam in the north of Syria. So, killed a Kurdish political leader, and she was participating in a sit-in near the dam, a protest aimed at calling the international community to do more to prevent attacks on that area, a major source of fresh water and electricity for northeastern Syria. It goes to show kind of just how little attention is on these clashes and this fighting. A similar situation, you feel like you would hear a lot more about this, killing a political leader who's protesting these military operations. And this is, again, an area where, the U.S. is backing the SDF, but the SDF is fighting another U.S. ally. Basically, the SNA is backed by Turkey, and Turkey is directly involved, launching airstrikes and artillery strikes and everything. So, just a mess. All right, so the next one here, where are we? Cable damage in the Baltic Sea caused by accidents. So this is something I don't think I've covered on this show. We've ran some stuff on it. All these claims about these undersea cables in the Baltic Sea being damaged, and all these Western officials are saying it's Russian sabotage. But the Washington Post reported on Sunday that recent damage to undersea cables in the Baltic Sea was likely caused by maritime accidents, not by Russian sabotage, as many Western officials have alleged. NATO has used these recent incidents to justify an increase in its military presence in the Baltic Sea and launched a new mission called Baltic Sentry just last week. And that, of course, ratchets up tensions with Russia, which is a Baltic, which has ports on the Baltic Sea. The Guardian reported on Sunday that a NATO naval flotilla has assembled off the coast of Estonia to protect undersea infrastructure. But this report from the Washington Post, which cites U.S. and European officials, said that investigations involving the United States and a half dozen European security services have turned up no indication that commercial ships suspected of dragging anchors across seabed systems did so intentionally or at the direction of Moscow. U.S. officials said clear explanations in each case indicated the incidents were likely accidents, and no evidence suggested that Russia was involved. In some cases, in most of these cases, it seems to be ships dragging their anchors that damage the cables underwater. And one of these tankers that is suspected of damaging a cable, the Eagle S, has been recently boarded by Finland's Coast Guard, and they arrested the crew, and they're being held indefinitely while they investigate this whole thing. They accuse the Eagle S of being part of a ghost fleet that carries Russian oil and avoids Western sanctions. A lawyer representing the ship's owner acknowledged that it was carrying Russian oil, but said it was not a violation of international law and denied that the tanker purposely sabotaged the undersea cable. So Western officials have said the incidents in the Baltic were part of a broader Russian sabotage campaign in Europe, and some officials quoted in this Washington Post report said they were not convinced that the damage was caused by accidents, but they have produced no evidence for their claims. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. made significant investment into Ukraine's drone program. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone. He wrote this for us on Friday. The Biden administration declassified documents, and officials spoke with reporters about Washington's clandestine support for Ukraine's domestic drone manufacturing program. The drone warfare program was backed by the CIA intelligence, with one official saying that it had a real strategic impact on the war. So this is kind of a big deal because this investment to the tune of $1.5 billion to support this domestic drone production means, which, we've known that the U.S. and NATO have supported these attacks in some ways, but this means that, these drone attacks that Ukraine is now constantly launching inside of Russia are supported by the U.S. And again, there's been reports saying that they use NATO intelligence and everything, but now they're coming out and saying that, we invested all this money in this drone program. So you see these drones hitting Russian cities, that's our doing. It's essentially what the U.S. is saying here. All right, so the next one here, TikTok briefly shut down, restored after Trump pledge. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone. So last night, I'm recording this Sunday. On Saturday night, TikTok went down. I went on the app and it said, sorry, TikTok's down for now. But it's back. So the popular video sharing app TikTok was shut down in the U.S. on Sunday briefly before it was reactivated after President-elect Donald Trump intervened. TikTok became unavailable to Americans after a law banning the app came into effect. Starting Saturday night, TikTok users in the U.S. began receiving a message that said, sorry, TikTok is not available right now. A law banning TikTok has been enacted in the U.S. Unfortunately, that means you cannot access TikTok. And then that message actually said that they were fortunate that President Trump has indicated he will work with us on a solution. And then, so I went on today and the message was, good news, we're back online thanks to President Trump. Thanks, President Trump. And it's just really incredible how, again, I want to be realistic with my expectations of Trump here, but it really goes to show how bad Biden is, that Trump's able to have these lanes where he can be like the savior of TikTok and be the one that negotiates the hostage deal, the ceasefire deal in Gaza, because Biden signed this bill, and then the Biden administration was saying things in recent days like, we might try to reverse the ban. Biden signed this bill to ban TikTok, and it happened. And the Supreme Court, this is very concerning. On Friday, the Supreme Court ruled against TikTok's argument that the ban violated the First Amendment, clearing the way for TikTok to become unavailable to Americans. So that's bad. And in their opinion that they wrote on this, they said it was done too quickly for it to be a legal precedent that will apply to future cases. They said it's a narrow opinion that just applies to TikTok. So they're saying, it's not a precedent, but it is a precedent, maybe not in the legal term sense of the word, but it's certainly a precedent. The fact that the Supreme Court ruled that the federal government could ban a huge platform like this over these vague national security concerns. So overall, the situation is still pretty bad, but at least TikTok he could still use it. And what Trump is doing, I think he's extending the ban, because essentially what the law is ByteDance, the Chinese company that owns TikTok, the law says they have to divest by January 19th. And if they don't, then the app gets banned. So what Trump's doing is he's extending that basically and saying that he says the U.S. should have a 50% share. So he must mean a U.S. company, so that they're trying to make some kind of sale. And again, this is just not a good precedent in the sense that the federal government shouldn't be having this say in a big platform like this, but it is. And, again, at least it's better that that it hasn't been banned, that it's been brought back, but the overall situation is still bad. And this is just a taste, I think, of things to come when it comes to this new Cold War with China and, potentially things in the future. Cracking down on Americans' freedom in the name of protecting them from China or whatever. I think we're going to see a lot of things like that. All right, so the next one here, Trump says that he had a very good phone call with China's Xi. So this is another one from Kyle. He's been writing a lot lately. Incoming President Donald Trump spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping, and the call came as tensions between Washington and Beijing have escalated since Trump was in the last White House. Biden was a huge hawk on China, and Trump was too. That was one thing back in 2020 or 2021, January 2021, when they were doing the Senate hearings for Blinken and William Burns and all the other Biden officials. The one thing they said Trump got right was China. They said he was right to be tough on China. Some of them even said he should have been tougher. Well, Biden was tougher on China. And now Trump has stacked his cabinet with China hawks, completely insane people like Marco Rubio, who are about as hawkish on China as you can get. So that's not a good sign. But Trump is sending some signals here. China's vice premier, I believe, is going to attend his inauguration. And he said he had a great call with Xi Jinping and that he wants countries to get along. So after the call, Trump said, quote, "I just spoke to Chairman Xi Jinping of China. The call was a very good one for both China and the USA. It is my expectation that we will solve many problems together and starting immediately. We discussed balancing trade, fentanyl, TikTok, and many other subjects. President Xi and I will do everything possible to make the world more peaceful and safe," end quote. According to the Chinese readout of the call, quote, Xi congratulated Trump on his re-election as president of the United States. President Xi noted that they both attach great importance to their interactions and both hope for a good start of the China-U.S. relationship during the new U.S. presidency, end quote. So we'll see what happens. I know some of the people, again, that he put in his administration, this guy, Elbridge Colby, who's all about, the U.S. has got to do more to prepare for war over Taiwan. If we see some big moves in the beginning in support of Taiwan, or if they're going to take or if the real hawks are going to take more of a back seat. But only time will tell. All right, so the last story here. Graham wants Trump to take out Iran nuclear facilities. Another one from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So ultra-hawkish Senator Lindsey Graham said incoming President Donald Trump should take out Iran's nuclear facilities once he returns to power. Iran does not have a nuclear weapons program, but the South Carolina Republican said Trump should take advantage of Iran's weakened position to strike the Islamic Republic. So he said, quote, "The next topic I will be engaging in with President Trump is to take this moment in time to decimate the Iran nuclear program. I don't think diplomacy works. Iran's proxies are incredibly weakened. Israel can go anywhere they want to go," end quote. So it sounds like he's saying that they should support Israel striking Iran's nuclear facilities. And again, this is something I fear that maybe this could be part of the deal to get the Gaza ceasefire signed is, okay, we'll help you against Iran. We're going to give you all this new military aid. Definitely an area to keep an eye on here. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Go check out our Viewpoints. Oh, it's Martin Luther. It's MLK Day. We publish his speech on the Vietnam War, usually every year, which is titled Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break the Silence. One from Dan Steinbach, The Fatal Effort to Dismantle UNRWA. One from Kathy Kelly, Dr. Martin Luther King's Prophetic Warning, Denouncing the Merchants of Death. One from James W. Carden, Getting Russia Wrong, A Quarter Century of Putin. And our spotlight from Tariq Kenishawa, A Ceasefire Won't Stop Israel's Genocidal Agenda. So please go check all of that out. Go check out our blog. Lots of stuff in the lower parts of the page, lots of Gaza stories. All right, so that is it for me. You could always support this show by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing it. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Follow us on social media, Instagram, X, TikTok, while it still remains. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Let's hope this ceasefire holds. Thanks for listening.